No. How many do we have? None. No, okay. Good afternoon. Calling to order the meeting of the Buncombe County Board of Elections for Tuesday, December 13th, 2022. It is 4:32 p.m. and thank you for filling the room today. I love it when community members are here in person. I hope all of you have had an opportunity to sign our attendance book. That's our official record of attendance at these meetings. If you haven't signed it yet, I hope you'll do so before you leave today. I understand that there is no one tuned in online at the moment, but we do expect some folks to be in eventually. There is one member of the board online. Glenn Schultz is participating virtually today. And my wonderful colleague, Mr. Aceto, is here in person along with yours truly. Ms. Block will be here. Mr. Carpenter has a conflict this evening and he will not be able to join us today. So, without any further ado, I feel a little awkward tackling minutes with just two people in person here. Mr. Aceto, did you have an opportunity to review those minutes?
I did. I thought they were, I have no objections at all.
Wonderful. Ms. Moore does a wonderful job on our minutes.
Yeah, she does.
Mr. Schultz, did you have an opportunity to review the minutes of November 17th and 18th?
I did, Chairman Quinn. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you loud and clear, sir.
Boy, the technology is working perfectly.
I love it.
It's
I love it. Can you see us?
Yeah, yes, I can.
I'm sorry.
There's okay. Yeah, I did get a chance to review them and they look great.
All right. I'll tell you what, I just want to wait a couple of minutes for Ms. Block to get here to have at least 4 members of the board before we do the minutes. But, knowing that everyone's had a chance to review them, I expect that process to be pretty quick when Ms. Block does arrive. So in the meantime, Director Duncan, if you could update us on what's happening in the office.
Absolutely. Okay, so we have the 30-day sort is complete. That data has been given to the state board and the state board's received all the precinct sort data from all 100 counties. So that data should be available sometime this week, if not tomorrow. The archiving is also nearly complete. We've got absentee left to do. We have the box truck reserved for Friday, so we expect to have all of the election materials from the general moved to storage by the end of the week. The budget, we're beginning to turn our eyes back to that. We've made a lot of progress on that. And we will also, I assume, be talking about some things that might have budget impact today out of our meeting. And I think that it might be prudent to have 2 meetings in January to help us with that. And I know you are planning on discussing what you, if you want to have standing meetings for 2023. On January 10th, we're holding our district meeting. That's in Haywood County, and board members are invited to that one. That's at 10 a.m. and I'll send you all the information for that. You can go yourself or carpool with us if you would like. And then I thought that we could end the office update section with Karen and Negi giving poll worker updates. And are you all ready for that? So Negi will give an update on poll worker surveys for early voting, and then Karen will update us on election day.
Election, we like to submit or send out a survey to all of our workers. And so we did this for both election day and early voting. And so I'm just going to go over some of the feedback that we got. We had 2 separate for early voting, 2 separate surveys. One was for the captain. And as you know, the captain is kind of the official chief judge during our early voting. And so they are the ones who run the site and are managing the site for their shift. And then, of course, we have the workers who are there to support. They're almost in the assistant category. So we sent it out at mid-November. And we'll start with the captain survey. Out of the 24 recipients, we had 18 responses back. There was 24 captains total, 2 at each of the sites when we had 12 sites. Just a little breakdown by party. We did have 50% of the party were Dems for the captains. 33% were Republicans and 17% were unaffiliated. So those are how we broke it down. Out of veterans and new captains, the majority were veterans. So we are very fortunate that we have lots of people that come back year after year to help during early voting. But we did have 29% first time serving captains, and we're always looking for great people that have great communication skills that are willing to help and manage. It is a stressful position. It requires a lot of information that you have to digest and be able to adjust. And so we're always looking for people that are willing to step up and fill those positions. Some of the survey results, we asked some general questions about training. Did they feel prepared? And so I've given you some of those stats and some of those comments. We also asked them about early voting training, the regular training. In addition to a regular training, we also provide a captains only workshop where those captains come in and they get more detailed training. And we feel that that's very important because when you're there for 2.5 weeks, you need to have that extra information, extra support to be able to handle some of those situations while you're working. And so I've given you a summary of some of those overview from them. We've asked how they can give us ideas for improving some of our opening and closing duties, giving you some of that, how to improve the shifts change. And so captains, have their own recommendations for that. And I'm happy to say that overall, they did rate us, the team performance. I think overall, most people were very happy with their teams. 80% said that they were the 5-star team. They felt that 94% felt adequately staffed. We did experience some sites who had illnesses like COVID or the flu, and so we did have some absences, but for the most part, everyone was adequately staffed. They did feel that their team excelled in their duties and would recommend being a captain, and they did do that. Some people recommended certain people to step up to be a captain, and so we always take those considerations for future elections. And then we also do ask, is anyone did underperform? We want to know if there's anything that we need to know about particular workers so that we can learn from that and see how we can maybe improve for the next time. So we're looking at people who may not have been good team players or any other areas of concern. And so they provide us with that feedback. But for the most part, I think everyone was well performed and did a great job, and they were very satisfied with their team makeup. And then we did ask them overall support. How did you feel overall supported by us, the Board of Elections, with our provisional line, the call center line, the rovers that go out and help them? And overall, we had a 94% 5-star rating. So we're very happy about that. They were very glad. Quick service and quick attention is some of the first things that they always like, is that we were able to respond quickly, and that's very helpful for them. But of course, they also have some suggestions as well. And so we definitely take all of these suggestions very seriously. There's always room for improvement. There's always ways to make things better. And so we will carefully review this for the next time so that we can see what we can do better. We can't change laws, but we can certainly change procedures and how we do training and things like that. So we definitely want to make those improvements as we go along. And always keeping in mind the next election coming up. How can we do better? How can we improve? The second survey we sent out was all to 100. We had about 166 early voting workers. Out of the 166, 66 responded back. The makeup of our workers by party was 55% was Democrats, 19 was Republicans, and 26% was unaffiliated. So I think we could try to do a little better with recruitment there in that aspect, and that certainly we will certainly try to do that. An overwhelmingly majority of our workers are returning workers. 64% were returning workers. And again, it is very doable for people to do shifts for 2.5 weeks versus a long 14, 16-hour day. So it is a lot easier to accommodate for that. People can certainly do that time frame. But we did have 36% new people. And again, we're always looking for new people that are, want to help, good in customer service, and ready to learn new tasks and skills. And so we're always welcoming new folks. Overall, folks that they have a better understanding of how elections work and how they feel confident about the election integrity. So that was a good sign. I'm glad. I think that's one of the things we tell people. If you ever want to know how it works, come work, and you will see exactly all the checks and balances we have in place and all the things that we do to ensure the integrity of this election. And so I think a lot of the workers can agree with that. We did ask about our onboarding experience with Spherion Staffing. We use a staffing agency to handle all of our hiring, payroll, and it's a separate company, and they do all of that. We did provide the feedback to them directly, so they know how they did. Overall, most of the folks were coming back, have worked before, and so it was an easier process for them to do. And so it works very well. Spherion is very responsive and very customer friendly, and we appreciate that. How do they rate their coworkers and captains? Overall, I think most people gave them a 5-star, 81%. And then, again, some people reported some things that we could always improve on. We also asked, how would you overall support? Again, the support you receive from us. So that's elections, Board of Elections, call center, the rovers, all of that. And the majority, again, gave us 5 thumbs up. 76% workers said that they felt supported, that we showed up to fix issues quickly and help with anything that they needed. And they felt that that was key throughout the entire process. It was very supportive in that aspect. We do ask for additional comments. What could we have done differently? And some of the things they said, more comfortable chairs, some, repeated about, the North Asheville Library. Again, that was, that was not an ideal location, and we certainly did not want to end up there, but that's where we ended up, and some things that obviously we could improve on, and we'll certainly do that. And some of the materials that we provide, we can certainly improve on some of those for easier access of important forms. We asked them, why did you choose to serve as a poll worker? And the majority said they feel like it's their civic duty. The next reason why is because they're interested in learning about the process and being a part of that process. And then after that, it was, they wanted to make sure that all the early voting sites were adequately staffed, and we definitely did that. And then there is some people that are motivated by money. We do pay them, so that's there, and then a few others. And then lastly, did they feel that training and the training materials prepared them for working? And 60% said yes, 34 agreed, and there was a few that said, that the training could have been a little bit longer, maybe emphasizing some certain things, and we will certainly take those into consideration because we can always make improvements when it comes to our trainings, and we certainly want to do that. So again, just high-level overview of what we captured from the workers. I think it's important that we always get their feedback because they're the ones out there doing the work, and we want to make sure that we are here to support them and learn from what we did. So we will take this and make improvements for future.
If I might.
Yeah, Ms.
You
Blunt.
just skimmed over that, but I just have to say
Mhm.
that when 95% of folks agree or strongly agree that their training prepared them to work early voting, that's really impressive.
Thank you. Yep.
I just have to highlight that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
100% will work. We'll get there one day, but there's certainly room for improvement. We can certainly make it better. So now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Ms. Karen, who's going to talk about election day.
The third document that's been given. So some similarities with the voting judges.
Excuse me, Linda needs one. She's got, so she can take home.
Yeah.
Suitable for framing. Good.
Okay, we had very similar breakdown party-wise. We had 52% of our chief judges were Democrats, 30% were Republicans, and 18% were unaffiliated. It's a little more even when we come to party judges. We had 41% were Republican, 42% were Democrat, and 17% were unaffiliated. And once again, we had a large number of returning people. Veterans were the majority. 58% of our poll workers were veteran workers, as compared to 42% of new people. We actually hired 544 people to work on election day. Only 472 ended up working.
Yeah.
So we had very, very significant drop off from the time of being hired to the actual election day. Significant number of people got sick. We were running into COVID, rearing its ugly head again. Flu season came about, so we did lose a lot of people because of illness. We also had, surprisingly, the second biggest reason that people didn't end up working was just that they simply stopped answering the phone or returning emails. They agree to work, and then when they give it some thought or something else comes up, they just decide that they're not going to do it, and they don't bother to respond and let us know. So it's rather frustrating not to know whether to replace that person until the last minute moment. Our appointed judges, because on election day, many of our judges have come through an appointment process that the board has approved. And on the second page, you can see the judges who were appointed and who ended up working. And I broke that down also by party, so that you could take a look at that. I think one of the things that I'd like to do and focus on next year as we come through that process again, the nomination and the appointment process, is to really try to emphasize to people that when you sign on to do this, this is what the job entails. This is what you're being actually asked to do. These are the dates of the election. And if you agree to do it, can you please block those in so that we know that we can count on these. I also sent out a survey. I had 120 people respond to the survey, but many of them also sent me emails. They had done that before the survey went out. And I think we get a lot of really nice feedback from this, and it's overwhelmingly positive, which is great. How much do you agree with the statement the chief judge handled the precinct with fairness, efficiency, and competence? We had over 80% strongly agree with that statement, so that was really nice. People commented how important it was that the chief judge was an organized person. If the chief judge wasn't organized, it created all kinds of problems for the workers, from the length of time closing up the precinct to the end of the day, to how boring it was for them because they didn't get rotated through different tasks. So we had a few responses that chief judges felt that they really knew better than we do, and they had got their own ways of doing things. So that was interesting to read. Not counting the chief judge, how do you rate your team in terms of professionalism, impartiality, and adherence to proper policies and procedures? Again, if you add far above average and above average together, that was over 90%. So it was a really good result for that. This one I'm always very interested to know how this one is going to come out, because I ask people, based on your experience as a poll worker, how much do you agree with the statement, "I'm reassured by the checks and balances in place, and I feel confident in the integrity of the election process in Buncombe County"? 80% strongly agree, so that was nice to know, and over 10% agree. So, I mean, 90% were on the positive side for that. Very, very few people that disagree. We also asked the same question about Spirion. Spirion, not terribly popular with our poll workers. They do have quite a lengthy onboarding process. Most of our poll workers felt it was their civic duty that was more important to them than money. And then I asked, how would you rate the support you received from the Board of Elections? And again, a nice, overwhelmingly positive response to that too. About 90% rated us above average or far above average. And then I asked if there were other things that they would like to share. Many of them commented that they liked some of the changes for the closing process. One of the changes that we had GPS trackers that came back with the chief judge, and that eliminated the need for somebody to follow them in the car, and that was much appreciated. There's a question on the back that I think Director Duncan was going to address to the room, and perhaps Chairman Quinn would like to add into some comments. But one of the things I liked, one person said we have a lot of children who accompany their parents to come and vote, and they'd like to see a kids voting program. There would be fun ballots with fun races in there, like favorite ice cream, etc., and a sticker that they would get participating. And for those of you that don't have a copy, I'll just read the last few quotes. I was pleasantly surprised at how efficient the process was and the quality and professionalism of my team. I really enjoyed working the election. I've wanted to do it for a long time. It met all my expectations, so I tried not to have any. I would do it again. And the last one, I'm grateful for the competence and the integrity of the Board of Elections.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
Is the question,
It was that first one
here?
Yes.
Yeah, it's like,
we could spend a day talking about that, but we can tag team that question. So it was, how do you reconcile the machine printout of votes cast with the actual votes cast? Have these votes been really counted? So they're asking about what happens outside of the polling location, what happens after they're done. And if many of you attended many board meetings where we did those things, and Canvas is the period where we do that. So for absentee by mail and early voting, we're reconciling all along the process. Each board meeting for absentee by mail, each day for early voting. And then we go through the process during Canvas where we're actually auditing that. We also do the sample audit where we check to make sure that the machines read exactly what the voters cast physically in the ballots, just to have that double check there. And then we tackle any problems in our public meetings. Anything that to add to that?
It might be worthwhile emphasizing that step during our training so that the folks who are working on the election understand that, when you've done all the stuff on election day, it's not over because we take the stuff back and we audit. And that might add some measure of reassurance, especially for the new workers.
I just had one question, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me? Is and it may be more a question about early voting. Was there any, were the MAT team workers part of the survey too? And I'm just curious if there was any feedback on the MAT team process since that changed this year as a result of the court decision.
No survey for MATs. I'm actually curious to know what the level of MAT activity was in this election versus 2020, 2018. Don't need to know that right now, but in terms of preparing for 2024, I think it might be worthwhile to get that
Absolutely.
information.
And we have done MAT surveys in the past. It didn't happen this time. But that's our intention is to do those surveys for them as well.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Blatt?
and do the MAT team members keep track of the number of folks they help? So we do have a record. of
Yeah,
that.
and we do have those statistics, so we can get those for you.
Good.
Okay.
Good. Any other questions? Comments? Mr. Rosito?
Thank you, Mr. Quinn. Thanks to staff for this marvelous survey. I'm sorry, me of little faith. I'm sorry I poked in your cage about it getting here. I should have asked the question, are we going to see the survey? So, but thank you very much that it's here and that you got it out as quickly as you did. Mr. Quinn, if we could set aside an agenda item next meeting, whenever that occurs, to have a little discussion after we've all had a chance to read and digest this.
Agreed.
And I've got a homework question for the board. It's kind of squishy, but I'd love to hear your answers to it, which is, based on what you see here, what do you all think is the culture of our organization? I mean, how is it reflected in here and what people had to say and what their expectations are and how they see each other, how they saw the people that they worked with. Mm-hmm. And I think this matters because it's you get what you measure. And I'd like to know that people's experience translates to something that we can articulate and that we can encourage the best parts of it. Mm-hmm. There was just more than just a mechanical survey of the process. Now, this really got into people's perception of their role and their work and the board's role and even our legal role. I mean, it was how does what they thought they were doing match with what the statute has charged us with, and they'll match pretty well. I think they do, but I just, now that you've quantified it, I'd love to hear from the board members. What do they think they're seeing here? And of course, I'm sure there will be some action items derived from it, but I thought it was remarkable for what it said about the culture of the organization and of the poll workers themselves. What they brought, what they took away. So I thank you very much. Also, I think this is deserving of being shared at the state level. And all 100 counties would benefit from getting this level of feedback from our poll workers, and I think our whole process would benefit from it. But as usual, Buncombe is out in front, and very grateful for that.
I look forward to having the discussion that you're suggesting at a meeting next month. We'll be talking about setting a date for those meetings soon, later in this meeting. But I like that idea. I also like the idea of having Mr. Carpenter involved in that discussion.
Yeah, we can. We need all hands on deck.
Amen.
That conversation.
We do. Ms. Duncan.
I think that's always a very important discussion to have, because we talk a lot about mechanics and the people here, we see us and we feel like elections, but our customers, our voters, they see those poll workers as elections. And so that is whatever feeling people get in those polling locations is the feeling that they attach to elections. And so it is very important that we're putting out the environment that we want to be, projecting what we want. I
Are
think
we
it's a
doing what the law
fantastic-
requires? And are we perceived to be doing what the law requires? Which is two different questions.
All right, any other questions, comments? I want to shift gears real quickly just to cross off an agenda item. Ms. Black, we started to tackle the minutes, but we wanted to wait until you were here. And I wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to review and comment on them. And I know that Mr. Aceto has, Mr. Schultz has, I have. So we are suddenly back to agenda item number 1. And I move that the board approve the minutes of Thursday, November 17th, 2022. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Thank you. That motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Quinn, point of order, if you don't mind, since we have a board member online, may I suggest a roll call? Just to be certain.
And Mr. Schultz did vote in the affirmative, and the 4 members in attendance have all voted to approve those meetings, Mr. Carpenter being absent. So.
Thank you. I think that's sufficient.
And we will segue right to a discussion of the minutes of Friday, November 18th. Did everybody have a chance to give them the once over twice? All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes of Friday, November 18th, Canvas Day, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. That motion also passes 4-0. We shall sign the minutes. And with that, we really do finish the election. All righty, thank you. Agenda item 1, taken care of. Agenda item 2, office updates, we've heard. And we had a nice little intro into the 2022 review. But before we get any deeper, I want to quickly move to that last agenda item. And Mr. Black.
At the beginning of the office updates, Director Duncan mentioned the 30-day sort.
Mm.
What exactly is that?
Ooh. Okay. The 30-day sort is when we take all of the ballots cast in the most recent election and we sort them by precinct. If you go to the State Board of Elections website and you get the results from Buncombe County for November 8th, 2022, you're going to see huge numbers, early voting site by early voting site by early voting site. What the 30-day sort does is it distributes all of those early votes by precinct. So you can actually come up with a very clear indicator how each of the 80 precincts in the county performed. If you go to the State Board of Elections website and you just look at the results for a given an election, you are not seeing the 30-day sort. You are not seeing the early votes distributed across the precincts. And you know the maps that they have there colored in red and blue? Those are accurate only for the data that they're reporting there. Because they don't have the early votes distributed across the precincts, those maps can be slightly misleading. Anyway, I'm sorry for that very wordy interruption there. I love 30-day sort data because that is the most accurate precinct by precinct information that we have. And as a user of that data, and didn't really mean to editorialize here, but as a user of that data, I am frustrated by the fact that our State Board of Elections does not use 30-day sort data when they publish election results. I still don't understand why we do it that way.
Is that information available then on the county website?
Once
30-day sort data?
the 30-day sort is done. It's on the state board's website.
Right. So you can download it. It's very easily accessible. You can manipulate it to the cows come home and learn a whole lot. But for some reason, it's not reflected in the election results report on the State Board of Election website, using the 30-day. I don't get it. Ms. Black?
So I was always aware that we took all of the mixed precinct ballots from early voting and physically sorted them into their precincts, but we actually put them through a machine and get a count per precinct and add that to the election night. Okay, I didn't know that.
Mr. Black, was that responsive to your question? Thank you. Were there any other questions about office updates? Okay, let's do 2022 review.
Okay.
I told Anna Catherine at the beginning, before the meeting started, I'll probably mess this up on next meeting day, and I won't do it early enough in the meeting. Thank you for catching me. Any day but January 10th, because we'll be in Haywood County from the sound of it. Colleagues, next month, Director Duncan is suggesting that we meet a couple of times so we can finish today's discussion, but also so we can get a good start on the budget. I would think that Tuesday, January 3rd is probably not a real good idea. The following Tuesday, there is state session in Haywood County, January the 10th. And so I'm guessing we would be looking at the 17th, 24th, 31st. Director Duncan, do you see anything else on the calendar that we need to be aware of as we try to make these plans?
Thing is I don't think we need to stick to Tuesday
Oh, okay.
for this, so we can open our.
Okay, we're really going to get flexible here. Huh?
Yes. And then I'm presenting the first pass of the budget to the county management on the 20th. That's the first pass, so changes can still happen after then. I'll do my second presentation to them on February 2nd. So we want to have things pretty in order before then. So I think meeting, switching my calendar to a different view so I can read it better. The 10th is probably not the best day, but that week I think would be a good one. If people are open to that.
Okay. It's Monday the 9th through Friday the 13th, January. And I'm flexible on days. I'll tell those in the audience that we typically have our meetings on Tuesdays because elections are on Tuesdays. I mean, it's really that simple. There's a lot in the calendar that is directed by law that uses those Tuesdays, but yeah, we don't need to stick with that, especially when we don't have any elections looming. This is our chance to really get things all set up for 2024. So Director Duncan, do you have any specific suggestions or recommendations with respect to that second week in January? Colleagues, how do your calendars look for January 9th, 11th, 12th?
Do the 11th, 5:30 and the 25th at 5:30. Work well for me.
Mr. Chair, I'm blown up for the 12th, but the rest of that week is fine.
The 11th works for us.
Mr. Schultz, how does your calendar look?
Any time in January, February is fine with me.
Okay, thank you, Clint.
So it would be probably We could have. Would you want to have 2 weeks between the meetings or one?
I'm going to be out of the country from the 25th until into February. So, if you can indulge me, those are not good times for me.
What do people feel about this, the 16th and the 23rd? So the 16th would be the initial review. I could incorporate those into my first presentation to DCM.
Do you care the 16th is a county holiday?
Oh, I do care.
Okay, I thought you might.
The 17th is our Tuesday. That's our normal time. So we could do the 17th and even the 24th if you wanted to stick to Tuesdays.
I'm flexible, whatever works, you know, I
Both of
live
those
for
are
the
good
Board
for
of
me.
Elections, everything falls for them.
I could do both of those.
17th and the 24th.
Yes. Thank you.
And we're gonna have to reach out to Mr. Carpenter and make sure that he's able to make this too. I really want everybody here, especially for budget discussions.
Then we'd also should choose a time.
If we keep it on Tuesdays. 4:30 works for me. I do have something at 5:30 on the 24th, but it's right downtown, so I think that'll be a problem.
Four 30.
Sure, good. So what are the dates?
17th and the 24th at 4:30.
24th.
Yep, and we shall confirm with Mr. Carpenter to make sure he can make those. There is another calendar related question, and that is, meetings beyond January. We don't have a lot of activity this year, but I think it does make sense to get together once a month. There's a reasonably decent chance that we will have developments in the legislative arena and judicial arena that will affect our work. And I think coming in once a month is a good idea. But, I've got a very flexible calendar. I don't know how it all looks for y'all for February, March, April, May. How's your calendar looking, Mr. Schultz, for the later months in 2023, February, March, April?
Well, I'll certainly be around to personally attend. I think it's a good idea just to meet once a month. People are going to have vacations and other conflicts, but I always think it's a good idea not to have long lapses between meetings because things do happen, and I think it's just a good idea to have regular meetings of an organization.
Agreed. It's not a complete month without an office update. All right. You know what I'm guessing? When we get together next month, we'll be in a better position to map out the February, March, April. But let's keep that in mind that that's what we want to do, just once a month after January next year.
I think that our upcoming discussion that we're just about to have might put some things on the agenda for future meetings. And then also keep in mind that the commissioners' meetings are on the first and third Tuesdays of the month. So sometimes people are interested in participating in those and they have to choose. So maybe not being on those days would be helpful.
What time are the commissioner meetings?
Were they 5,
they're
5:30?
usually 5:30, yes.
First and third Tuesday?
Commissioners' meetings are first and third Tuesdays.
Okay. Okay, let's do the 2022 review now.
Okay, fantastic. And before I begin, I have a message from Devin that says the precinct sort data is available.
Wow.
So that was very timely.
Mhm.
All right, so we met with temps before they all left us to discuss how things went for them. So we got input through them on how what types of improvements we could do. And we also had 2 staff meetings. They were very long meetings, each where we talked about kind of just the after election review. So from that, we came up with 4 points that we thought that would be relevant to the board. So I thought that we could go through those, talk about those. And most of these, I think, actually should be addressed in a meeting of their own. But I think that we should bring them up now so that our gears start turning on things. And then I would love to hear any input that you all have for improvements, especially ones that might have budget impacts. So the 4 items that we had are thinking about budget. We think that it might be appropriate for the board to have more of an input on how many early voting sites are while we're building the budget process. And so that would be something that we should do as we're thinking about budget for the next fiscal year. And we have suggestions on that. And we can have that discussion. Definitely don't need to make that choice now, but that will help put parameters on how many sites that we should request in the budget. That gets a little tricky when the new board, necessarily doesn't mean that the whole board will be replaced, but it could be a new board in the future. So we could be making choices for them. So we have to keep that in mind.
They would not be bound by that.
That's true.
It's just for budget guidance.
Yes, exactly. So it would just be changes. If a new board wanted to make a change, then there'd be processes that we would have to go through, but that can be addressed when we're speaking about the budget. And that'll help us have long-term future planning if we do that. So that was something we came up with. The next thing that I think has come up a few times is a general overall review of voting locations. So that's for early voting and election day. And I suggest that we have an open meeting where people can come and talk to us about both sides, complaints about voting locations and suggestions for new ones. And we do that early in 2023, so that if we find suggestions for change or different improvements, we have time to shift if we choose to do that. Changing voting locations is a board decision, so all of that will have to go through the board. And we should.
Please pardon my interruption. I like that idea. I like that idea of going to the public because they're the ones who use these voting locations. I hate the idea of asking the public to come in here for that discussion. So let's talk about doing a road show where we go out to communities, where voters vote. And that way, I think we can get better participation from the community. Go to all 4 corners of the county.
Mr.
See if we can do
Chair,
something better. Mr. Cito.
you have on numerous occasions expressed a desire to create some kind of a precinct by precinct database, or
Yes.
talk about that a little bit.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Mr. Aceto. One thing I've been interested in for a good long time is developing a profile of each precinct. That profile would include things such as the voting location, its address, its degree of ADA compliance, the size of the parking lot, how comfortable it is for workers and for voters, what other conflicts there might be in using that space on election day. That precinct profile would have data about how many people are registered in the precinct, what the turnout looks like in that precinct. So we have a really good view, a really good picture of what that precinct looks like. We would have information about folks who have been election officials at that precinct. So we know, oh, look, this is the same set of folks every time. Well, different folks every time. Look at this. We have a hard time staffing this precinct. We have an easy time staffing that precinct. What we want to do is compile all that information so that no matter who's on the board, whether you've been on the board for years or whether you're brand new, you're going to have a solid set of information that all the board members have that does as good a job as we can describing each of the 80 precincts and what that precinct needs to make sure that it has a really smooth running electoral process. So one of the hard things about being on the board is the board members come and go. Staff knows what's going on. Staff's here. But board members come and go, and there can be quite a learning curve one has to climb when you get on the board to find out about all 80 of these precincts, not to mention numerous early voting locations. So the idea of having these precinct profile reports is to have a compendium so that the board has the information the board needs to understand what's going on and to do as good a job as they can making informed decisions.
Mr. Chair, go ahead.
Ms. Blatt.
Hearing you say that, I can definitely see how that could be used for public education as well. I think there's a lot of folks that don't really understand that a precinct is more than the number on the voting card, that there's actual humans that meet in precincts and don't understand that precincts make up clusters. And if somehow that information could be made more available along with some education around precincts and clusters and the process of getting involved locally, that might be really helpful.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned clusters, because when I made the suggestion about, let's take this public discussion of voting locations on the road, let's take it out to the community. I was thinking of the clusters.
What's a cluster?
A cluster is a group of anywhere from 4 to 9 precincts, and I only know things based on the experience that I have had with my party. I don't know how other parties do it, but it's an attempt to take 80 precincts and organize them into smaller groups that are easier to manage. And so folks can get together periodically, get to know one another. One of the things that I've found in my work with clusters is, let's say you got a cluster with 6 precincts and 5 of them are, they're pretty well organized. They got precinct officers, they got election workers. One of them struggles. One of them always has a hard time getting election workers or something. Those other 5 precincts, they get together, they help out the people in the 6th precinct in the cluster get organized and figure out how to do this stuff. It really does help the parties get organized at a more granular level. It's hard to do with 80 precincts. I mean, goodness knows, much easier with them, with a smaller set. But I only know my own narrow experience on this one, but I found clusters to be very, very helpful.
I have different vocabulary for that.
I don't know. I mean, I guess it's a way to organize data. And how do you pick what are you going to organize? And which gets back to, I wish I'd written down everything you said about the things you wanted to measure in a precinct, because that's kind of my related question is I'd love to have the discussion about what are we measuring at the precinct level or the cluster level or whatever level, because what you measure is what you tend to get. And I look at this exercise, when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about the recruiting data from the election, from the 3 sources here. I think a masterful job was done of assessing what ought to be measured. Probably, certainly we can mess with that some more. But that was a pretty good exercise in organizational judgment. I just so maybe lightning will strike twice when we do this precinct level data gathering process. Yeah, I think that the conversation to start with ought to be about what are you gathering at the precinct level? You know, just what are you measuring, and talk about that. So, you know, I would encourage staff that when we do get to the next level, to the next meeting where we talk about gathering information at the precinct level and coming up with precinct profiles, you know, what do you all think that we ought to be considering? And you know, what is a precinct? You know, what's the profile of the precinct? You know, what is it? You know, how do you describe it in a way that, and for what purpose? So, you know, I kind of look forward to what you all have to say about that.
When you say what you measure is what you get, what do you mean?
That in organizationally, when one is this kind of I understand it's sort of an aphorism, but that if you're organizing any kind of an organization, that as it gathers data about its progress and its prospects, that those things that are actually measured, that you turn into numbers, tend to be what you focus your energy and your resources on, and for better or for worse, because you could leave something out. And so a real critical decision at the start is you know, what are we and what are we, and how do we describe ourselves and what are we measuring, so we know, you know, what we're encouraging and what we're feeding and what we're starving. Because if we haven't measured it, then we don't even know what it's eating.
I guess the one question I would have is, I mean, it's a great idea, I think. I guess two questions I would have is, number one, it's only good if it's an ongoing process where it's updated regularly. But the bigger question is, with all the things that go on in election years, is this something that the staff is just going to have time to do? I don't know how much time it's going to take, and I mean, there's 80 precincts, but I just have that question.
The beauty of it is that, excuse me, we have the data, and the challenge is to compile the data in a fashion that makes it easily accessible and reviewable, especially by the board members. And I think that this whole concept is going to be a whole lot easier for folks to understand when they see a draft of a precinct profile. Not all 80 of them, just one generic profile, and you will see the different data elements that we already have. I do not envision the need to develop any new data for this. We've got it, but we just need it all together in one place where when we're making decisions about elections, whether it's the location of a polling place or who the election officials are going to be, whatever, we've got that information right in front of us, all 5 of us, same set of information, with as much detail as we can muster. And the question about what gets included, I would say anything that's relevant to the process. And that's one of the great things about having 5 perspectives on this board, because different members are going to have different ideas about what they think is relevant to the process and what they'd like to see in there. And I think that's going to enable us to develop as comprehensive a profile for each precinct as we can.
Saying that you think this is going to help us make decisions about voting locations and such?
Yes.
Why?
Why? I'll give you an example. When we do a precinct profile for precinct 23.2, that's right, 23.2, I haven't forgotten you. 23.2 votes way, way, way outside the boundaries of their precinct. They come downtown to vote. A precinct profile is going to make that very, very obvious to the board members. When they see a map of the precinct and then they see, in order to vote, you got to go down the mountain and go downtown. Board members are going to understand that this is suboptimal and it's something that we need to try to address. Without that precinct profile report, it's not readily apparent. As soon as you see the map of 23.2, or as soon as you see the map of 60.4, it becomes very, very clear that we have an exception that's not following the law. Law says you're supposed to have your precinct voting location within your precinct. Sometimes we just can't do that.
I mean, I'm not, I heard Corinne mention that one of the things we need to do is review all voting locations. I would certainly love to have a list of the voting locations that are outside of precinct. And I would like to really work to make sure that they're all in precinct as much as possible. And I know we've done that, but we haven't been successful in getting it there.
Right.
So I'm excited about the idea of getting public input so people can give us new ideas that staff can then follow up with. Because I know staff has tried and tried and tried, but there's only so much a human can do. And the community knows a lot more than we do.
A community helped us out with the early voting plan for this fall. We got that site in Shiloh from community participation. We also had really good community participation in freeing up parking at that North Asheville Library parking lot. So that's one of the reasons I like the idea of the road show and getting as much of the community involved as possible, because I think there's a whole lot we can learn from them. Question?
But again, I'm just worried about the amount of who on staff is going to be delegated this responsibility and.
Oh, well, I understand. I have discussed precinct profile reports with Director Duncan numerous times. And she and I have agreed that 2023 is an opportunity. I mean, I personally can't stand the fact that we don't have a whole lot of elections November 2023, but the silver lining to that is we have more resource availability for doing the kind of work that I'm talking about with the precinct profile report, or the kind of work that we're talking about on doing follow-up on the review of the 2022 election with an eye towards making 2024 work more smoothly. That's what 2023 is for us. And with the hires that we've had recently and the fact that all of this data already exists, nobody has to run any programs to develop the data. It's there. It's just a matter of pulling it off the shelf and putting it into a format that's helpful for board members and members of the public. Yes, question.
I think is a wonderful idea. I think you're going to get information that you don't have in your data set.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if you're going to include that in your data set.
If it makes sense to.
Pardon me?
If it makes sense to, I think that as we look at this going forward, we do it with an open mind and a great deal of flexibility. Our objective is to make things work as smoothly as possible for voters, for staff, for election workers. And the more input, the more perspective we get on that, I think the better job we can do getting that preparation completed.
And Mr. Quinn,
Mr.
we're going to
Cito.
learn what to measure.
Pardon?
We're going to learn what to measure.
That's part of what, if you're just looking at numbers and you haven't included the new input,
Mhm.
you may miss some very important information.
Do you have something in mind, like right off the top of your head that you're?
Well,
I'm
I
just
think
curious.
the Shiloh, that Shiloh issue going back to the fall about getting that, I wonder if people had not been here who were concerned about it and showed up in the audience to bring that up, would you have necessarily learned about that?
Mhm.
So that's a for example.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, where are we?
You got one?
Another question, Jay.
Mary Jane.
Good break.
Karen, who would that information then be provided to?
What, in precinct profile report? That would be an internal document for election services staff and Board of Elections. it would inform our work. Well, we'll see. We'll make that determination. I'm not making any promises. Let me put it this way. My interest in this and my objective in this is making sure that all the members of the board are as fully informed as possible when they are making decisions. And I know that new members are really at a disadvantage because there is a ton and a half of information. You know, maybe you can speak to this, Mr. CEO, but it takes a while to kind of get up to speed. And I think one of the things that we can do to help board members, I mean, whether you've been here for a long time or whether you're brand new, is to provide this information. And we don't right now, or it's done on an ad hoc basis. There isn't a formal compilation. And I don't know. This is something I've had in mind for the past 5 years or so. And I view 2023 as the golden opportunity to try to finally get that first draft out with a very clear understanding that anything like this is a living document. It's going to change all the time. It's going to change all the time because the data elements all change. Our population changes. Voter registration changes. There's just tons of stuff. Legal requirements change. When we first started to establish precinct voting locations, there was no Americans with Disability Act requirements that we had to follow. There are now. And that's the kind of thing that would be captured in the precinct profile report. Is this a good accessible location for voting? Yes or no? Right now, it's kind of hard for 5 board members to visit 80 precincts. Isn't it? Isn't it hard to visit 80 precincts, Mr. Chair? What, Mr.
Can I speak to what was just said? I think it's kind of important.
Okay.
Again, I have to get you indulge me in another devotional reading from the book. But I won't read the whole thing, but just
Thank you.
163-33 describes the powers and duties of the Board of Election. And 163-35 describes the duties of the director. And 163-33 goes on for 13 paragraphs that are numbered, describing the duties. But I think that's a good grid. Is, you know, so just to start with, are we measuring the things that the law says that we're supposed to be doing? I mean, how am I doing? Well, what am I doing? And am I doing this? And to get back to your comment, or Jane, is that, you know, if this is what the law tells us to do and we're measuring that, then we owe it to you to share it with you. Okay, that's, you know, that's getting to the heart of why we're here. And but this isn't an exhaustive list of what we ought to be looking at, but it's a great place to start as we're considering what we think is relevant, what we want to measure. Is look at 163-33 and look at these things and say, you know, do you really have any idea whether we're doing as a board what we're charged with by statute? Not that I think there's some deficit here, not at all, but you know, just as we're beginning to think about how to think about it, planning how to plan, you know, we do have a sort of roadmap here. It's a legal roadmap, but you know, take a minute to look at it.
Okay.
Some of these things obviously don't lend themselves to any kind of you know,
Right.
of planning type exercise, but a lot of them are, you know, are you doing what it says you're supposed to do, or have you at least made a provision to ask that question and get an answer? You know, it's just a way that we hold ourselves accountable to the people and to each other. That's a place, just that's an example, I think, of what we're talking about here.
Okay. Director Duncan.
So I definitely see opportunities in this, and I have wanted to do a review of our precincts for a while. And
Yeah, I'm sorry, that was quite a lengthy interruption, wasn't it? She had 4. She only got through 2.
yes.
My bad.
You know, whatever we come up with, we do elections even though we have a giant customer base and media and all the things that we do, we have a tiny budget, so resources are limited. So whatever we come up with, I think we can come up with something that's useful to staff, the board, and the public. So, you know, I think that we can come up with something that works. And we do have more resources now with more people. So we might be able to devote a little bit more of that. But thank you to everyone who watched out for us of making this practical. It does, everything that we do in this department needs to be practical. And Steve, I like, we need to keep bounds on things, and I think your basis is a good one. And then a little bit outside of that, another benefit of doing this and understanding our polling locations and where we might want to improve, the county is also looking at their comprehensive plan for the entire county. And it might be that we can suggest maybe we need more community centers in this area. So we can contribute that way too with this review. So I definitely think it's something that we should prioritize for the beginning of 2023. And it can unfold in many different ways, but I definitely think we should take time for that. The third item is something that we have discussed previously, that we have made lots of progress on, that we need to continue to make progress on, and that is election day poll worker recruitment and interaction with the parties, clarifying that process, making better forms, having clear communication on dates. So I think that we should continue doing that, absolutely. And I'm glad that we made the strides that we have already. And then the fourth thing, which I think that we can have some discussion on now and also fits well with what we were just talking about with precinct report cards and having information for the board, is that now that we have a trainer and a clerk to the board, we have a little bit more capacity to serve you better. And by serving you better, we serve the public better. So we want to know what you would like that will help better operations. So how does the board want to communicate? Were the laptops that we provided useful? Do we want a different configuration for the boardroom? We would like to provide training for the board. So when the new board comes in July, provide training. What do we want that to look like? What resources would be useful to you? So definitely want to have a discussion on that. And if there's anything immediate that you know right now, we can talk about those, but I think that we should also make time for that in a later meeting as well.
Let me just chime in real quickly here because I just came on in March of 2022, but just in terms of getting a handle on the law, and this is something maybe it's for the state board to do, not the county boards, but if they could just provide a summary of what the law is in terms of elections in North Carolina. I know back in 2016, I forget how I came across this, but the Democratic Party had put together a summary of what the law is in North Carolina about elections. It's something you can look at if you needed a quick answer on something. If the Board of Elections State Board of Elections could, and I don't know how these recommendations kind of filter up to the state board, but if they could put together a 50-page summary of what the election law is in North Carolina for people like me who are new and never dealt with election law before, I think something like that would be really helpful to somebody coming on the board or people who have been on the board for, a more lengthy period of time. By the way, if you ever wanted to see a copy of that summary that the Democratic Party put together and distributed back in the 2016 election, I'm glad to drop a copy or send a copy to you in the mail.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. I like the idea. Just wondering how many years it would take to develop that.
Well, and certainly the devil's in the details. because looking at the law is always involves an opinion of what the law is.
Exactly.
And opinions will vary, but it sounds like a good exercise, because that's what we do all the time.
That's why we have you, because you know this book, right? You know.
Absolutely. The 2012 edition, I know all about.
State Board has a new general counsel. I think this is a great opportunity to make a suggestion.
This document the Democratic Party put together, I understand Steve's point. It's a good one. It really just covered the statute. I mean, just the statutory provisions. And I understand that people could look at that differently, but I thought it was helpful in just providing an initial roadmap as to what the law provided regarding elections in North Carolina.
And I have one other comment about that, which is that the Devin did a really good job of a high fidelity speaker arrangement back here. It's really maybe too good, because Glenn sounds like God speaking from off stage. And it's really unnerving because he's not in the room, but I hear his disembodied voice. So I just want you to know, Glenn, you're creeping me out, but I'm glad you showed up.
And Glenn, I would add that as much as you seem to have the voice of the Almighty, I would take full advantage. Get what you can.
There's an upside and a downside to that.
Like everything. All right, 4 items. Discuss early voting size.
A very important fifth item.
A 5th item.
Yes, and this definitely would require a meeting, perhaps all onto itself. And that is through our various discussions and frustrations throughout the election, our ballot on demand system came up a lot. And so we are thinking that a switch to express vote should be considered. So that would be switching to express vote only for early voting, not for election day, and moving away from the ballot on demand system. And that would increase our reliability. They'd be machines that last longer. If one went down, it wouldn't be such an impact that it has on us now. But we can go into those details later. And I think we should do it later because it requires definitely this is a voting system change. So the board needs to be on board with this. And there's a lot to think about with it. Definite budget impact. So it's another one that we should prioritize early because if we want to do that for 2024, we need to get that on the radar of the commissioners.
And we would need to do tons of education and outreach in the community before we rolled that out. And yeah, certainly a budgetary impact there. And we would also need ES&S at the table to make sure that they can provide the level of service that we need. When are they going to upgrade their machinery? Wow. That's a big deal. Okay. Yeah, that does sound like a meeting unto itself. I'm wondering, though, if we are going to reach out to the community to discuss voting locations, might we also want to talk about this? Just so y'all know, Ballotar is a machine that we use to produce a specific ballot for a specific voter during early voting. As you know, we have myriad ballot styles depending on your party, your district, all that kind of thing. And Ballotar will give you exactly the ballot that you're supposed to vote. The problem with those machines is they're not the most reliable, and we use them a great deal. I mean, you look at the amount of early voting activity, it's staggering. So the express vote is the machine that we use that generally it's sight impaired or hearing impaired voters who go to a voting site to cast their vote are able to use this express vote machine, which marks the ballot for them. And if we used express vote during early voting, we wouldn't need Ballotar machines. and the breakdowns wouldn't be an issue for us. We already have an express vote machine for every precinct and for every early voting site because we are required to make accommodation for people who need those facilities. So it might be that when we take this out on the road, we can show people and just try to get some kind of feedback. Don't want to shock anybody with anything.
Ms. Duncan, am I
That'd be
right that
change.
that's what Charlotte does exclusively? They
That's
just
right.
Use express vote basically, so there's no paper ballot. It's on the
That's
screen.
correct. Mecklenburg County.
That's any piece of paper.
Yeah, it's okay, but that's not how the voter is interfacing. They're interfacing with a screen
Yes.
and then it turns into a piece of paper. That's good. So I would say let's imitate the good things about Charlotte, and that might not be one of them, but just the same. Thanks. I appreciate it. Deserves that level of that the chair has just discussed.
Yeah, this is, it's a tricky
And
one.
we'd be remiss if we didn't look at it.
Yeah. There's pluses and minuses. I mean, it's not an easy call to make.
Mecklenburg does use express vote, and then we do have a county in District 1, Transylvania. They use it for early voting. So if you attend the district meeting, I'm sure that's a topic that we can talk about with the other counties too.
Good.
Yeah, perhaps even getting someone from another county to come and tell us their pros and cons
Yeah.
of their experience.
their experience. Okay, so five items, two of them are voting locations or the number. Poll worker recruitment in relations with the local parties. What does the board need? And Bellator. Is what?
And about our machines that are back there, the one that kept breaking down and then the other one broke down. Where are we on those machines and the plan for those?
So the plan for those is putting that at capital request, and you'll see that in the budget for 2 new ones as soon as they're available. They're supposed to be available this year.
A new model of it?
Yes, the 950s. Yeah, there are no 850s available.
Yes, with that.
Would we be in a position to sell the 850s? Or?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Fingers crossed that they become available. Colleagues, anything that you would want to add to this list of items to discuss? Yeah, everything I have actually falls into one of these categories or another. I know one thing it doesn't have a huge budgetary impact, but just talking to folks who are the early vote workers, that last Saturday is brutal. And 3 o'clock can't come soon enough. If there's something that we could do for those workers, send something out at 11 o'clock noon, buy them lunch the last day or something, just to get them across that finish line smiling. But that is item 3, worker recruitment and that sort of thing. I know at the end of 2.5 weeks, they're pretty much running on fumes. What else do we have? One thing I do want to take a look at when we're reviewing precincts is split precincts. Precincts that are not geographically contiguous. A precinct shouldn't be in 2 parts. It should all be connected. And I want to make sure that the same precepts that we hope our General Assembly uses in drawing districts are precepts that we follow in precinct development here. And I know there's been a whole lot that has developed, and by development, I mean real estate development, since we last redid the precincts. And we haven't redone the precincts for like 15 years. So just in terms of making it easier for voters, There might be some cases where we would want to recommend precinct boundary changes. We got to look at topography. There's so much development that has occurred since we last did precinct boundaries. I want to make sure that we have rational precinct boundaries.
Whose role is it to determine our precinct boundaries?
Excuse me?
Whose role is it to determine the county's?
It is a process that at this point is very, very tightly controlled by the State Board of Elections. County boards used to have more flexibility. That flexibility was diminished for a pretty simple reason. There are a lot of people who like to see the data collected for the same geographic area, election after election after election after election. And when you change precinct boundaries, you lose the continuity in that time series. And so elected officials, nothing. Elected officials, not election, elected officials tend to prefer that we leave boundaries just the way they are, because that's the data that they have used historically to get elected. And so we don't have nearly the flexibility to change precincts that we did years ago. It's not as important that we change those boundaries anymore. Back in the day, before we had early voting, you wanted to make sure that you had your precincts organized so that you could handle the crowd on election day. We handle our crowds during early voting pretty much now. And so I look at a precinct like 18.2. When 18.2 was drawn, it had a population that was really a small fraction of what it is currently. 18.2 is an enormously populated
Where's 18?
precinct. Oh, it's south. It's TC Robertson High School, and that's right near the South Buncombe Library, right? You can, with the amount of development that occurred in terms of condominiums, apartments, residential communities, it's exploded in population. And once upon a time, we would have been pretty quick to change that precinct boundary just so we wouldn't be overwhelmed on election day. It's not as urgent now because so many people vote early, but it is still a concern. And actually 18.2 is kind of a tough precinct because it's such a busy location. One of those things, but that's one of those things that in precinct profiles, that becomes apparent. The fact that the adjacency to Robertson High School, it makes it a very difficult voting location because traffic at the school. Anyway, how did we get there?
That raises an interesting observation, is that one of the things that, just speculating on how our role is changing, is that we're a data source. And the data that's being used to determine how an election is conducted is changing, and the sources are changing, and the algorithms that are used to interpret it are just really in their early stages and being developed. And so we're a data mine. We're a mother lode of data, and we're going to be asked more and more about that. It really indirectly but significantly shapes things. And I haven't begun to wrap my mind around that question, but it's something to put your finger next to.
It's true. I mean, we are, to a very considerable extent, an information agency here. People look to election services for the information because it's an official source.
And if we think of ourselves that way, how does that change things? I mean, that's intriguing, but I'll keep you here all night speculating on that one. But the idea of the Board of Elections as an information agency.
Well, I am very grateful for the.
And we do want to come back and have our usual devotional reading when we start thinking that way.
But yeah. You look at the work that staff does right now. You go to the dashboard and you can find out precinct by precinct what registration numbers look like, and you can get demographic breakdowns, and that's out there every single day, and that's easily accessible, available to anybody, everybody. Building on that makes a whole lot of sense. But we have a really, really solid foundation now based on all the good work staff's already done and all the information products that are already available. More and more. What else? What other changes?
Things that we changed that you like, that you didn't like, or, and it can be about the election in general or how staff meetings went, or sorry, board meetings went. We have some suggestions that we can bring up later, but if there's anything that you like to let us know, we want to hear it.
I think we worked on the efficiency issue when we had thousands of absentee ballots to review. So I appreciated all the efforts to make that process as efficient as possible. I still remember the first time we got a list, it wasn't even alphabetized, and the ballots weren't alphabetized. And I mean, I know that's a lot more work ahead of time, but it definitely was appreciated.
I'm going to be real curious to see what the volume of absentee voting is in 2024. Remains to be seen what the voting rules are going to be.
I appreciated having that visual. It was, the folks are here, they want to know the numbers and how many absentee ballots we had, and how many we're approving and how many we're not approving. It was nice to have a board there with some visuals so everyone could see those numbers, and it just felt more transparent, and I could just glance up there and know where we were, and other people could do that too. So that was nice, a nice touch.
I expect the whiteboard to remain.
I appreciate having the other staff come and join and team up with us so that we could work as pairs.
Yeah, like we did in 2020.
Yeah.
And think about how to make that board that Linda's talking about with the tally more friendly to the online viewers, so they can see those numbers.
That's a great point. Mr. Aceto, thank you for bringing that up, because one of the difficulties we have is we are in temporary space, but we are in this temporary space for a good long time, bad long time. And I couldn't agree with you more. We need to use this screen so that members of our audience can see what we are seeing. So members of the public perhaps can see it. If not, well, yeah, we can just project it right on the internet feed. But yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot we can do to make this facility something that everyone in the community gets to take fuller advantage of. And I haven't really focused on it much because I know we're just here temporarily, but darn it, they haven't started to build that new building. So we're going to be here for a while. Ms. Block, did you have a comment?
I had one other question. Over the course of the past year, it seems like there are issues that come up, and they're really legal issues, which seem to be merit a memorandum from the state board. When we review the absentee ballots, the one that came to mind as the year went on, because I changed my view of this thing as the year went on, was how should we assess the issue of witness signatures or questionable witness signatures on absentee ballots? As far as I can tell, there's memos that address voter signatures, but, and I may be missing something, but there's no memo that specifically addresses witness signatures and how they should be looked at and that sort of thing. If there's any way that we can have a process of formulating issues that we think the state board should take a look at and come out with a memo, because they're always well researched and well thought out, that would be helpful, I think, at least for me. I can only speak for myself, but if there was some process by which we could formulate a question to pose to the state board for them to think about in terms of providing guidance.
Do we do? Where's the line where we can say there's enough concern that these are the same person signing these 3 spots versus not in the role that we're in?
So we can definitely bring things to the state board, absolutely. And I think the more we do that, the better. So we can, it would be great to have a list of things that we bring. It is also the board's duty to deal with those gray areas.
Right.
And one thing I think that we can approve on in the gray areas is when we, try to anticipate more, especially when we have board members who have gone through things and have areas that they want clarity on. Have that discussion and let's document it a little bit better so that we don't, aren't scrambling, looking through the minutes for what we decided in 2020. Have a formal process, whether you all want to do that in a policy, and then we have those policies stored somewhere in the boardroom where everyone can review them.
Yeah.
I think something like that will help. What did we decide last time? Why
Right.
did we decide that? And it'll also help us record what is not clear, and we can bring those to the state.
Yeah, some of the voter intent questions, like if there's a write-in, and that's the only thing that's there for a particular candidate, but they didn't circle in the bubble. Or, we said we were going to accept that this time, but is that a rule? Is that going to be the next time? And where, if we make those decisions, let's keep track of them. I agree, and make sure that we have them easily accessible and reviewable.
Excuse me, ma'am. Did you have a question?
Person before, and I'm wondering at some point, will you allow us to ask the questions that we have about?
Yeah, we'll get there.
Okay.
We'll get there.
Jake is in the back.
Yes? Yes, sir.
I'd just like to second that. I mean, I appreciate your discussion about how you listen to the public members.
Yeah. No.
You can listen to them.
Okay, I understand. I will tell you how Board of Elections meetings work. We have 5 members of the board. 4 of them are participating today. 1 can't make it. And we are teeing up the discussion of the review of 2022 and prep for 2024. Before we ask the public to weigh in with observations and suggestions, we like to have our discussions, and we like members of the public having the opportunity to hear what we've discussed so that they know, oh, here's what they didn't hit, or gee, they talked about this, but I see it differently than they do. We want to give you the benefit of hearing our discussion before you weigh in with your observations and issues. So I thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate the public participation, but I just wanted you to know how it tends to work, and everybody gets to play. Within reasonable limits. I mean, we don't want to stay here till the milkman comes, but well,
But not too
There-
comfortable.
exactly. There's pluses and minuses to that. Colleagues, I'm hearing some urgency from the audience that they would like to participate. Before we turn to Q&A, do you have any more observations, comments, or questions for staff?
See through these glass windows to see what's going on in those rooms, and I know that as an expense, and that wasn't the plan initially. I don't know how long we're going to be here, but I do think it's important that we be able to just glance in and see what's going on. especially in that room there that, well, really both, but. So.
And the trick there with one-way glass, it's got to be a heck of a lot brighter in there than it is out here for that one-way feature to work. And that might be something that we can talk with facilities about to see if we can do something to, and it might be something as simple as using spotlights, but it's something we can explore anyway.
Just put on the list.
Yes, yes, it is on the list and we have explored that with facilities. That's why you all are in the dark. We took those lights out there so that it would be brighter in those rooms. And we added different lights into those rooms with lamps, and it's still not working. So I really think we just need to remove the one-way tinting at this point. But we agree. Our idea did not work.
My Italian cousins thought that was pretty cool. Was it the Balotti? That was.
To be able to see.
Yeah, that's right. That was.
I thought it was cool too, but I just wish that it worked better. Yeah. Anyway, let's take some questions from members of the audience, some of our visitors. Yes, please. And if you wouldn't mind identifying yourself, because we want to get it recorded in the minutes. Thank you.
And I've been a citizen of Asheville for a number of years now, and I want to begin by expressing my gratitude to you, the Board of Elections. Thank you for your time and your energy and your talent to make our elections an example of integrity. And it is my hope that you will be bring the needed consequences for any behaviors that took place in the past election that were in a violation of the election standards. And I also want to add to that, and don't we all benefit from any consequences to our wrong choices that we make? Hopefully, the painful consequences brought about by will bring about positive changes in anything that was lacking in standards. Thank you for listening, and thank you also for hearing our serious concerns this evening. And I think it was Jane that was going to speak to some of those specifics. You other people, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I sent you this. My name is Jane Bolello, and I am Vilello, and I am from the North Carolina Election Integrity Team. We are a 501c4 in North Carolina, where we're trying to make it easy to vote and hard to cheat. So what I did was on Sunday, I sent you this electronically with concerns that we had. I know that Jan Black presented you with information on when you had the canvass. And at that time, you acknowledged the fact that there was a problem with illegal electioneering. And the way I understand that you finished is that you were going to investigate what happened during early voting and election day on the illegal electioneering. We want to know who did this, who said it was okay, why did they do this, how did it happen, who paid for the materials, when did the Board of Elections director know about the electioneering, what and when did she do about it, what's been done, and we'd also like to know is why are the judges or the site supervisors involved in the electioneering not been fired? Why is the board not even handed in dealing with judges, and site supervisors? You recently fired a Republican judge for one Facebook post about a candidate, but didn't fire the Democrat judges who publicly endorsed Democrat candidates on their campaign websites. What safeguards are you going to put in place to assure that illegal electioneering does not happen again? So those are some of the issues that we have, and we would really like to know how you are addressing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions?
Observe that as an observer, and as a voter. And,
Can you step out to the?
Sure, oh, I'm sorry. So, I am here to, I was gonna make the point myself. I wanted to know what happened, if that was in fact illegal. I reported, it several times, to, the state and to Jane's organization. And, some lawyers seem to think it was acceptable, but I hear that somebody else has decided it was illegal. And I would also like to know what recourse we have. You know, just because, and I go along with what Jane says, you know, if nobody pays a price for this, if it is illegal, it's going to happen again. So I'm not saying somebody needs to be executed, but some penalty needs to be paid by somebody so that this doesn't happen again.
Thank you. Mr. Black brought this to the board's attention on Canvas Day on November 18th. And when he brought it to our attention, we put it on the agenda and we had a discussion at that meeting on the 18th. And there was consensus, there was unanimity. There wasn't a single member of the board who thought that it was appropriate. But as Mr. Black observed when he made his presentation, because I had asked if he was interested in filing an election protest, he did allow that, considering the margin in those two referenda, there probably wasn't any chance to disqualify that election. And what I appreciated was the information that this board received and the commentary that was shared with this board that convinced us that it wasn't appropriate to have that documentation out there at those sites. And you can bet that on a going forward basis, both members of this board and staff will take steps to make sure that we don't see a repeat. I don't know how it all happened. I don't know how it all happened. I don't think any member of the board knows how it all happened, but we are agreed that it will not happen again. And as, in terms of penalties, the way the process works is if there was something that was done that violated the law and it was such that it would change the outcome of the election, then that election, you can file a protest and that election can be challenged. And we recall what happened in the 9th Congressional District in 2018. They reran an election that wasn't conducted properly. As Mr. Black suggested on November 18th, and I am here to tell you that I agreed with him, it didn't seem that there was any activity that occurred that had changed the outcome of the election. It might have changed margins, but it was a very overwhelming yes vote on both questions. And under the circumstances, it seemed to me, and please, Mr. Black, correct me if I'm wrong in my surmise, but it seemed that you deemed it not really appropriate or worthwhile to file a formal protest because the election would be allowed to stand. Am I getting that right?
Yes, that
Thank
was my feeling at the time. It was a 2-to-1 vote on the issue.
Yeah.
That's very difficult to overturn that. But at the same time, there needs to be an investigation. You say you don't know what happened.
I don't know.
We need to know what happened. And we need to know why it happened and who participated. And if there may not be a consequence as to the outcome of the election.
Yeah.
there should be a consequence for the people who acted improperly, because that should have been pretty clear, but it was.
Well, in terms of the clarity, I will remind you that as we heard on November 18th, county legal staff reviewed that document and determined that it was not inappropriate. Now, it happens that this board has a different view. But I do want folks to know that pains were taken to make sure that it did get legal review. This wasn't some person acting as a free agent and trying to do something underhanded. There were any number of people who did take a look at this before.
The review that occurred in the paper was the purpose of its dissemination by the county, which was proposing the bond issue. So it was approved for that purpose.
I actually don't know the purposes for which it was approved. I do know that the county attorney reviewed it, determined that it was not pro, it was not con, it was simply enumerating facts.
And Mr. Quinn, it's worth noting that we didn't, as a board, participate in that review.
That is
Staff did not participate in that review. If there's a question to be asked is, how did that stuff come to being erected in the polling place? And that's a question. That rabbit is worth chasing. How to get there? Not so much what is it or did it change the election, but if we're going to address this in the future, is how to get there and who takes it down if it does show up again. Because we fall. Go ahead.
Well, no. I'm the only one in this room who can give permission to speak. Now, I realize you haven't been here before, but everybody's got to follow some protocols before this descends into more chaos. Yes, and so I want to see a hand up. I want to hear a name.
I'm Karen Hensley.
Thank you, Ms. Hensley.
Right, I
Right.
don't do this very often, but the little bit I know about this case, two things bother me is that it was election and electioneering, which is illegal, period. And then wasn't there a consequence to the taxpayers in Buncombe County?
$70 million.
That's what, so how does that figure? And then the other thing, the inequity of one judge got fired because of one thing and other people weren't.
Okay,
So that's not right. It's just not right. So bow off.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Ms. Brain.
Just to clarify for me, I am an election judge. So when
Thank you.
take that oath specifically says that I will not induce anyone to vote for a candidate or proposition. And this is the proposition. If someone was to come to me when I'm working and say, can you give me information on this candidate? I would have to tell them to go look for that information, but I could not do that. And this did not happen in my precinct, but that was by voting day. So I understand it's in early voting, but see, I have the question because I take an oath that I'm not going to do this. And everybody that works in any of those precincts takes that same oath. So someone somewhere either didn't understand that this was a proposition, or, I mean, that there's a miscommunication somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to know what it is, because I want to know what I'm responsible for.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you. There was a miscommunication, and I think the miscommunication hinged on the fact that there was a review of that piece of paper that said that this isn't pro, this isn't con, it's not partisan one way or the other, it's just enumerating facts. And it's very clear that different members of the community have a different view of that fact. And that's what this discussion is really about. And I mean, I get it. As I mentioned, this board said, this is inappropriate, shouldn't have happened. Director Duncan wants to say
I
something.
do. Because there are people who weren't at the meeting that were at campus meeting where we did discuss this, I just wanted to say a few things. So I do think that there is, in my mind, that it's not clear whether what the piece of paper's intention was. But it is clear that we don't want that slippery slope. Let's just avoid it altogether. And so our department, that wasn't a decision that was made from the top down to have this documented. One of our temporary staff made that decision, not known to me. As soon as I learned that it was out there, it was, take it down. And so that's the stance. What I think would be productive for us to talk about now is how, what do we put in place? And one very simple rule that our department can make is anything that goes into that polling location has to be approved by me. It doesn't, no one can make those decisions. So that is absolutely one thing, one thing that we can have that's not approved by the State Board of Elections can go through me. Some rules like that we can do to have make sure that we have safeguards in place that so we don't have to have this discussion again. So just wanted to make sure that everyone understood what the stance of all of us is, so that we're not in a discussion of whether it was electioneering and whether there was that we need to make sure it doesn't happen in the future. And these are concrete things that we can do to do that.
And these are things that we discussed on November 18th at our board meeting when this was brought to our attention. And we said, this has to stop. We don't want to see this anymore. And that's when Director Duncan said it makes sense for her to do a review of everything that goes into the binder that goes out to the election sites. So this board is very concerned about the issue, and we absolutely are determined not to see a recurrence of it. Yes. Yep.
In Buncombe County, and I've worked many elections as a chief judge, a party judge, an observer.
Thank you.
And I think election integrity is very important. And I would never, as a chief judge or a party judge, I would have never allowed that document in the polling place. That's just it's like having a resume of a candidate lying on a table. The resume might not be advocating that you vote for this person, but it's raising the profile of this person. And it's suggesting that somebody consider this person. And I appreciate your point of view, and I appreciate your call to action on this. I would just like to say that I think that the team captain, is that what you call the person in charge of the polling place during early voting? I saw this at an early voting location. I did not see it at the second early voting location that I observed at. So I thought that this was kind of a renegade situation. And I think that whoever was the team captain at that polling location, and I don't know if this thing was at more than one. I only saw it at one, but I didn't visit every polling location. Whoever that team captain was should not be a team captain again, because that person does not understand the oath, as you so well put it. They might be an election worker, but I don't think they should be a team captain.
Thank you.
Mr. Quinn?
Mr.
If there's nothing else from the public, I do want to comment, but I see there is a comment here.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Mr. Evans.
I suggest that since this ballot should benefit, if the county attorney rendered a legal opinion on it, he conflict of interest. And should not have done it done by somebody that was objective. Will you put in writing, Director, so that everybody that does elections from now by something in writing, knowing that all these things have to come to you?
Yes, we can do that.
Let me just say also one other thing. I have a friend that was a priest, and he took confessions from nuns, and he said it was like being pelted with cotton balls. And I've participated in monitoring elections in New Jersey. I spent a week in Detroit in 2020. And coming to here was like being dealt with the cotton wool compared to what I was used to. People run a very good system.
Thank you.
I was very pleased with what I personally saw. I went around it, looked at a bunch of different things. In Newark, we were assaulted by crowds. They had campaign literature right on the table where you would sign in. And I had to have armed guards at one point in Detroit. I wore body armor the whole time I was there. And I came here, expecting to see that kind of stuff going on here. I was very, very impressed. I want to tell you, the staff was well trained. Everybody seemed to be in good faith. You're really trying to do the right thing. And I appreciate how seriously you've taken this complaint. I hope you act on it. So I just wanted to know some outside perspective.
I might add that Buncombe County is a community that is dedicated to fair elections. Welcome to Buncombe County. Please, sign up to be an election official. But one of the things that there's a lot of things we're proud of in Buncombe, but this is a community that has a very high registration rate, a very high turnout rate. In 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, we had over 1,000 members of this community pitch in to make the election work smoothly. And we voted 80% of our registered voters, and it went smooth as could be, even in the middle of the pandemic. And that only happens when so many hands are pitching in to make it work. And no, it's a wonderful community when it comes to elections. I've got colleagues across the state who are very envious of Buncombe County. Ms. Black.
How we asked a Republican election official to leave because of posts that were on Facebook. And that came to us through a particular process that we all got to hear what was going on. There was actually a hearing. Now, there's mention that there's a Democratic election official that's doing something similar, and I'd like to know about it, and I'm sure we all would. Might somebody just review the process to bring that to our attention so that we could give it the same consideration as we did the last person?
Yeah, last May, there was a member of the community who filed a complaint, and there is a standard form. And you can find it on the State Board of Elections website. You fill out the complaint, and then the board hears the complaint. And when we heard the complaint back in the spring, there was a very, very lengthy discussion, and we made a determination and moved on from there. Anyone who has issues with anything that happens in the elections sphere, there are ways to lodge a protest, lodge a complaint. Mr. Black, when he came on Canvas Day, when he started to speak, I really thought that he was all set to file an election protest. I was wrong. And he told me, no, I don't want to go there, but I want to make sure we talk about this. So he had done the research. He knew what the protocols were if he wanted to go one direction, but he just wanted to make sure that we got this into discussion. Anybody can come into a meeting and raise an issue, but in order to force the board to act on something like that, file something formal, and we'll do it. We have had, in 2022, we have had voter registration challenges. We had a candidate challenge. Those are pretty unusual. But there are ways to do it. There are ways, if you see something that you think is amiss, the chances are very, very strong that there's a formal way to proceed on that. Ms. Black?
Just wanted to add that I think the result of that challenge and that conversation in the hearing and really difficult decision was that our training staff was made aware of the necessity to make sure that during training, election officials understand what they are and are not allowed to do and for how long. Do you just have to not campaign during election time, or is it all year long? That's where we need clarification. And so that everyone knows, because you know, there's a lot of ambiguity and people do things and they just don't know. So trying to make it so people really do know. And so that was an important outcome, I think, of that whole conversation. And again, we don't want any party supporting candidates openly with their election officials. So it's important to us.
Right. Mr. Rosito?
Thank you, Mr. Quinn. I would just want to be sure that those present, can take to heart what Ms. Block is saying. That I sometimes I think there's some expectation that we're like, Walmart checking our employees and making sure that they're not, they're not abusing people in the aisle of the store. But we've got a very different standard here, and that we are obligated to give due process to give our workers the benefit of due process, or voters the benefit of due process. And some of our conversations internally and externally, since I've been on this board, have really delved into this. The idea of what does due process look like for our election workers? We don't allow people to be fired on rumors. We don't allow people to be fired on hearsay. It's not like a complaint that you put in, to the bank because the teller, tripped you on the way out the door or something. This is, or the grocery store. This is we're held to a high standard of due process. So when the Democratic Party made the complaint against this election official, they did so through their chair. And you'll recall when he didn't show up in person, we almost shut his hearing down. But we didn't turn him away, but we required that he appear because the law says that the complainant must appear so that the accused can confront their accuser, because that's what due process is all about. So, I think, if I might speak freely, if anybody's expecting this board to go around with a hose and start, cleaning out everything, you're going to be waiting in vain. But if you want to, if you are aware of misconduct, there is a process, and it involves due process, and that's to protect everybody so that we don't have people run out of their position on rumors and accusations and innuendos. Is that there's an opportunity to bring a complaint and for the person who's complained against to respond to that. And I would like to think that we would never discipline or remove or otherwise, even say bad things about an election worker on the basis of rumors and innuendos. Get them substantiated. Bring the affidavit, bring the complaint, do the process, get it out of that realm, and get it in front of this board, because we are obligated to follow due process for the benefit of voters and poll workers and everyone else. So it's apples and oranges when we're talking about electioneering, and we're talking about the performance of the poll worker. If something involves a poll worker's performance, let's bring it to due process, because that protects everybody. And that's what we've been encouraged to do. What I hope the record of this board shows is that when something is brought for us and we apply due process to it, we are obsessive and compulsive about it. And we do follow that. And that's one of the things I'm very pleased after having come on this board, because I think there's an appreciation for that. The other piece that I hope we'll take away from here is, again, we're always concerned with how do we improve our staff training. And we learned from the complaints that were brought last year that there was a need to clarify for the benefit of the workers what exactly can they do and can they not do, because the law is very clear. I mean, it says what they can do and what they can't do. So it became apparent to us that it wasn't clear to people. So that's something that we're going to try to do better. We're working on that. Electioneering is probably another place we can do a little work, and some practical things like, who is it that's responsible to police the area to make sure that there's no material that doesn't belong? Everybody's busy. I thought you were going to take care of it. Well, no, I didn't, because I was doing something over here and it didn't really seem to matter much. Well, guess what? Now we know. So that's what you'll see happening. What you won't see happen is that this board's going to gather some kind of an informal review of what happened and then go and then go pour gasoline on somebody or pelt them with whatever. I guess you could pelt them with cotton balls, but soak them in something flammable and then you set them on fire. But we will respond to a complaint timely brought that gives the accused a chance to respond and have the benefit of due process. That will happen every time. Well, the next steps that I would suggest, if I might respond to it, is first of all that that you should be confident to come forward and see what staff does and what we do as a board to our training process that addresses these specific things. And one way that you do that is you sign up and you work as a poll worker and you go listen to the presentation. So and if it's something's missing, then you immediately bring that to the attention of the presenter, and I think you'll find that you'll get an immediate response. I'm very proud of these folks that present these things, and yeah, they're listening. If they're not, yeah, the board wants to know that. But that goes through the person who's in charge of staff, which is a lady sitting here at the other end of the table. So the second thing is about, again, that they would have an appreciation of electioneering and as well as campaigning. What is it that they can do and they can't do? And Jake points out, rightly so, that it's a little squishy. And it's one of those things that it's a legal matter about which legal minds will differ. But we'll do the best we can. That's all we can do. And finally, as far as what will happen in this particular case, if someone has a complaint to bring against an election worker, there's a process. There's a process. And we don't try them in this meeting informally. We try them formally, starting with a complaint, starting with evidence that's brought forward and the opportunity to hear the accuser and do what due process requires. So, and that's what we as a board, I think, and I think you join me, that's what we would ask of you as a public, is that you take advantage of that process and don't put us in a position where we're being asked to bypass it. We can't, because you could be the next person who's complained against, and you wouldn't want that to happen to you without us being required to go through the same process. And but believe me, everything that's said in here is going to be taken to heart. Mr. Quinn, what say you? I mean, it seems to me that it is. I think I understood that we dealt with it at Canvas, and I don't know what more we could do.
Yeah, as far as this board is concerned, you're correct, characterizing it correctly. Within county government, I expect there are questions being asked, there are discussions being held, but this board is not part of that process.
Well, no, if it has to do with the performance of an election official, no, this is the right place to be.
I think we're talking about the county distributing information about the two bond issues.
Okay, so there's no way that I can think of for this board to have execute some legal consequence on the county. Well, we protested an occurrence, but you understand, how do we get our hands around that? Is as a board, I mean, or as an agency, we can't go punish the county. What would you do? If you caught if the dog caught the car, what would he do with it? So, but if there's a performance of individual people that we have jurisdiction over, that is to say, right, the election officials themselves, then follow the due process and deal with it through that complaint process that is directed at a person's conduct. And that's, where, as far as dealing with the situation in general, you just heard it. We're going to deal with it with education and deal with it again. What's our process on that at this point? I mean, remember, if you're going to complain about just the general idea that something was posted in the election, that,
Okay,
well, that's done.
if you want to, if you wanted to file an election protest, a protest of the election, that, well, in fussing about the electioneering, I think what you're saying is that the outcome of the election was influenced by this activity that should not have occurred. And the deadline for filing that was 122. It was 5 p.m. on November 22nd, which was 2 business days after canvass. Please correct me if I'm wrong on that one. He's got the red book memorized. Not true, I don't. But no, I looked at that because, I mean, Mr. Black certainly called my attention to this matter real fast. And I was real concerned about this. And so, you know, I took a look at it and I saw the rules for election protest. And that's why when Mr. Black first rose on canvass morning and started to talk about this, I told him that he was not in order for filing an election protest because he had to wait for canvass to be finished before he could file the protest. And that's when Mr. Black told me, no, that's not the road I'm going down, but I'm real concerned about these actions that were taken. And then we ended up having the basic argument.
But Mr., if I might be clear here, you know, there's 2 different things going on here, and they're very important to understand the distinction. One is the impact on the election generally, and that's dealt with. The process for that is to timely file an election protest. And then the question becomes, first of all, you know, was there blood? Is it because there's no blood, there's no foul? In other words, did it change the election or have the potential to do that? And there's a time to do that because we don't want people being able to indiscriminately reverse election results at some point in the future. We got to put a collar on it. Then there's the question of electioneering, which is potentially a misdemeanor crime, if I'm not mistaken. But you see what's happened there. Now we're talking about you got to name names. Somebody's got to name names. And if you're asking the board to go back and name names, I don't think that's going to happen. If you have to name names yourself, there is a process for doing that. Now, I'm speaking for myself individually at this point, but
there is that third element, and that has to do with the lessons that the board and staff learned from this episode and changing training and being hyper vigilant about this sort of activity. And also, you know, I'm expecting Director Duncan to mention this at a department's head meeting in county government and say, look, we don't do this. And that is, I think that's very, very important for this board going forward to make sure that we don't see it happen again. Yes, sir.
What is the process if this is a criminal? We should report it to the district attorney.
We have to go back and look. I mean, the statute does have some pretty specific that who enforces these things and what's the power of enforcement. For one thing, the chief judge can contact the sheriff, if I understand right. I mean, there is a process for dealing with misconduct election day and dealing with it immediately.
True.
Well, I think that's a red herring here. I mean, we don't, you know, we're not in a position to judge the material other than the fact that it's pretty simple to us. I think you don't post things in a polling place, period.
We heard about the legal review only when Mr. Black raised this issue at Canvas. Staff was able to give us some background information, and that's when we heard that a member of legal staff in the county attorney's office had reviewed this document and had determined that it wasn't speaking in favor or in opposition.
Satisfactory. We've had attorney authorized.
Well, I think our point is that
we heard about this.
We didn't make a
10
judgment
days after the election. Our director will review whatever material and make the determination as to what's appropriate to include in the binder of information that's delivered to each of our voting sites.
Well, when it comes to legal opinions, if there are people that are going to be on record opposing this, maybe their attorney should be able to step in and say something.
Well, what I'm saying is the legal department in Buncombe County does not make the determination as to what is delivered to the voting sites. The Director of Election Services makes that determination.
Then the people make a mistake. Either their attorney should be informed.
And that is the kind of discussion that occurs at a department's head meeting in Buncombe County. And so, oh,
It's a direct comment. They shouldn't have given legal something to do
thank you.
unless there was a case in controversy with the county, but the county was being sued. That's something to do in relation to the attorney can do that.
I don't think anyone was given a formal legal opinion. I think that a document was reviewed by an attorney in the legal department, not with a view towards, is this appropriate or inappropriate from an electioneering standpoint, but is this neutral or is this biased? And I don't think that when they were reviewing the document, that they were giving full consideration to everything that we're concerned about. And that is electioneering, pro, con, otherwise, we don't want it. And that's the teachable moment in this for other department heads in Buncombe County. Well, they will, because
So, electioneering affects business I vote. Might be other things that come up in the future, so it's very important.
oh, thank you. We are very sensitive to having fair elections that comply with the law. And we, as a board, we're very disappointed that this occurred, and we're determined that it's not going to happen again. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Election judge at that precinct should have called the sheriff and said, these people are breaking the law, right?
That's not what I would have done. That sounds like a very dramatic escalation. You call the sheriff, okay, but the nuclear option is not our first option, it is our last option. And calling the sheriff is the nuclear option. What you do, if you see something amiss, let's say you're a voter in the precinct and you see this thing and go, that shouldn't happen. What do? You talk to the chief judge. And if you don't get satisfaction from the chief judge, talk to your party judge. Get the three judges talking together, figure it out. You don't get a satisfaction there? Come on downtown, talk to the office.
That's what you have. Well, but have names, I guess.
Well, yeah, it's.
Have videos, I don't see have names.
It didn't come out of election services, so it's.
Well, could have been a voter that dropped it.
Well, maybe we should file a complaint with the sheriff's office and ask them to investigate and see what happened. Because everybody is involved in the integrity of the election, not just you folks. But everybody that's involved in it is part of that. In Detroit, your severe violation went to the chief of police, he just blew us off. And so everybody said, well, that election was an easy jump. Because nobody was doing anything for the election. I mean, gross violations. I personally witnessed them. But I think maybe we should file a complaint or bring it to the sheriff's attention and maybe these people would be on record. Yeah.
Well, I want you to know it is on record here at Board of Elections. We just approved the minutes of our November 18th meeting where Mr. Black made his presentation and we had a discussion. That is all reflected in our minutes. And those will be posted on our website before you know it. I mean, we're not trying to hide anything. We are not happy about what happened. And all this episode did was create more work for all of us. We don't like that. We're busy enough. Thank you very much. Mr. Black.
complaint against that team captain. Some testimony about what's done. Team captain's gonna have to answer some questions about where you got that spirit. One attention to that stuff and find out if it was a rogue actor.
His brain.
The last thing I would like to say is, can the board actually, I'll clarify with the State Board of Elections,
All right.
the time period for which judges and election workers are actually not allowed any type of electioneering or political activity.
I would never respond to that. You might have heard about a rulemaking that the State Board of Elections did last fall that got thrown out. That rulemaking was exactly what you're asking for. And it is my expectation that the State Board of Elections will once again pursue establishing the rules that you are seeking.
Yeah, they did that too close to.
Exactly. And until then, we will review things on a case-by-case basis as we did in the past. But if there's a new set of rules handed down, you can bet your bottom dollar that this board will follow them to the letter. Thank you. Did anyone else have any more questions or comments? Is there any more business to come before this board this evening? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned at 6:55. Everyone, thank you for caring. Thank you for insisting on elections with integrity, because that's what we're all here for, and we all want the same thing. Thank you so much. We got a super staff here, and they're all about having things go smoothly and having every voice heard, every eligible voice heard.
Yeah, I have